Good evening and welcome to Presspass. My name is Masai, and as promised, this is a focus tonight. That's actually one of the relatives of Kenyatta saying that they haven't stolen anything from anyone, and these are other suspects out of the 20 who were arrested today and awaiting a court session tomorrow over the NYS scandal. This story has dominated the headlines this past week, and that's why we're here to talk about it and how to get the story right moving forward. And now we have, let me just reintroduce my panel here. And so far it's two. I was hoping Patrick Gadara will be able to make it. He says there's a big project that he has to work on. Hopefully he'll join us as we continue. But if not, the two will definitely have enough to tell us about. This is something they have been keen on and actually working on this week. You are working on it in a separate way and you tell us about it. And you're working on it in a separate way, you tell us about it. And of course, this is Wanjeri Nderu. You've seen on many other platforms speaking on social justice, especially because that is what she is, a social justice crusader. She is a trained journalist, so she has a keen eye on how we've been telling this story and some recommendations on what else we should be looking into. And Victor Bwire, programs manager at the Media Council of Kenya, actually today was at a workshop with 20 journalists, 15 from around the continent, and of course talking about reporting on corruption. And this is one of the big stories that came out today, and this was filed by my colleague Seth Olale, and this was right after the office of the prosecution of the ODPP said that Nuruddin Haji said that there are 54 individuals, 40 of whom are public servants, who are going to be investigated. They have recommended that they be prosecuted because they have very strong evidence against them. And of course 20 were arrested earlier today and will be arraigned in court tomorrow. Let's hear what the ODPP had to say today.
The Office of the Director of Public Prosecution is investigating the 8 billion shilling NYS scandal in phases. The first phase involves over 468 million shillings paid out to 10 companies or entities. The DPP, Nuruddin Haji, explained why it took the prosecution about 3 weeks to investigate the multi-billion shilling scandal.
In order to strengthen the case, I returned the files to the DCI to cover some critical areas. On 27th May 2018, the DCI resubmitted the investigation files. Upon careful perusal and evaluation of the same, I am satisfied that the evidence is sufficient to warrant urgent prosecution and that it is in the public interest.
54 people, including 40 public servants drawn from the Ministry of Youth Affairs, National Youth Service and National Treasury, were listed as suspects by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. 14 directors and proprietors of business entities, together with 10 companies, were also blacklisted and are under investigation. The 40 public servants, led by Lilian Omolo, who is the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Public Service, Youth and Gender Affairs, will be charged with several offences including conspiracy to commit an offence of corruption, willful failure to comply with the applicable procedures, breach of trust by a person employed in the public service, willful neglect to perform official duty, abuse of office, fraudulent acquisition of public property, and fraudulent making payments from public revenues for goods not supplied.
Investigations revealed that there was no procurement undertaken before monies were paid out. So there was no procurement whatsoever.
James Twitter and Yvonne Ngugi, who have been listed by the DPP as among the 14 directors of business entities involved in the scam, own a salon in Thika. Josephine Kabura, who was mentioned as the key mastermind in the previous scandal at the NYS, is alleged to have also owned and operated a salon in the same locality. Apart from the 20 suspects pending the night in police custody, others are still at large, with the DPP issuing a stern warning to the fugitives.
I urge all suspects who are in hiding to surrender themselves to the DCI or the nearest police station.
In the second phase of the investigations, the DCI will focus on additional areas, including companies or entities that benefited from the fraudulent payments and banks that were complicit in the offences. In addition, the prosecution aims at recovering the proceeds of crime as well as establishing the tax status of the companies and individuals involved in the crimes. In the meantime, several bank accounts and the funds which the monies were channeled through have been frozen.
My office is working with the DCI and the Assets Recovery Agency in that regard.
As the investigations continue, the DPP, who has appointed 4 special prosecutors to assist him undertake the task, said more suspects are likely to be charged in relation to the scandal. The Director of Public Prosecution believes that the charge sheet that will be presented in court on Tuesday is watertight and has gathered enough evidence to ensure that all culpable face the law. Seth Olale, NTV, Nairobi.
So that's where the story has reached, and tomorrow you can expect our cameras will be at the Milimani Law Courts as the 20 who are being held this evening, I believe, will be appearing in court to face those charges that have been listed there in Seth Olale's report. And this has been the story in all the newspapers, on radio stations, on television stations, whichever you fancy and whichever your choice has been over the weeks. And I'd just like to put it to my guest here, what you feel the reportage on this has been, and whether you feel it's been up to scratch. I'll start with you.
Let me begin by saying that today morning, some of us were pretty shocked when we heard some people had been arrested. And as much as the government would like to show us it's working, for me at this moment, it is still a PR exercise.
Okay.
Because I asked myself, had we not, talked about it, had there not been an outcry, would we have seen this kind of reaction? Okay. Because for the first time in a very long time, people have reacted, to this theft. And I don't like using the word corruption, Mark, because what you do when you use that word is people don't really, they don't. I'm trying to look for the word. They don't, it doesn't resonate with them. We have to use the correct word, and this is theft.
Yes.
These people are thieves, okay? And when we call them by their rightful name, thieves, we also simplify it for the common mwananchi.
Okay.
And it also brings down to even how we report as media.
All right.
Or rather, how you report as media, where you use these big words, corruption, you use this word, billions. If you ask the mama mboga in the market, do they understand what a billion is? I mean, you need to simplify this theft such that that person down there who does not understand what it means for this money to get lost, understand that these thieves are killing them.
Right.
And they're killing us, Mark.
Okay.
So arresting a few people here and there today, all right, to show us that something is being done, for me it's an insult to us.
Is it also a way of you saying, and I'll throw it to Victor to respond to what you've brought up, but is it a way of saying, cautioning the media, as you follow the cameras, follow the law courts and the process so far, don't be fooled, this is a PR exercise?
Yes, to me it's a PR exercise.
All right.
You need to report corruption in the most humane way possible. You need to let that person who does not understand what it means for a billion, for a person to steal a billion, what it means to them as an individual. When we are burying people because they're dying of cancer, when we are going to Kenyatta National Hospital and have to protest for services to improve, it is all because of this theft. If they were not stealing this amount, the monies that they are stealing, 5 billion disappearing, for instance, in the health sector, what can that do for, Kenyatta?
Would you say that they understand, given the rage that people have given this story? Don't you say they understand this is theft of their resources?
I think most of the outrage we are seeing is online,
yes.
Okay? And as I had spoken to you off camera before, the fact that we are even having a campaign like Stop These Thieves is a way for us to simplify this thing, for everybody to understand. Okay. What is it we're trying to tell you? We are saying that according to the Auditor General, 600 billion is getting lost on average each year. And that is only what he can be able to put on paper. So what is it that he can be able to put on paper that we don't know? But if you break down this 600 billion, it gives you 25,000 shillings per second. per second. So when you tell Mama Mboga 25,000 shillings is being stolen per second, she will understand that math.
Okay.
But when you give her a billion, she'll go like, okay, I don't relate with that figure.
Victor, is it as simple as that in terms of, first of all, even what someone might argue, tagging it as thieves is, first of all, passing a judgment on this particular story. So in practice, it wouldn't be ethical. What's your response?
Thank you, and thanks, Wanjeri. And one of the things that you have seen, even in terms of the charges, for the first time, I mean, we are seeing an attempt to charge people with specific offenses. Because what has been happening previously was very blanket attempt to charge people and say theft and what. But you can see specific cases of abuse of office, failing to, those are specific issues that it will be easy. And we start moving away from theft to specific cases. And I applaud the media, but that they have done a lot. I know Wanjeri and colleagues make a judgment based on 4 newspapers and the 5 TVs, the national one, and say, like she's saying that they were saying $1 billion. But who does nation target? I mean, a bit of a literate audience that can understand $1 billion. I have listened to the vernacular radio station, the local-based radio station from Kilifi, from Turkana, from wherever, and I see the stories of corruption coming. And at that level, they are talking about amounts that resonate with those environments. Okay. So to me, I would say they have done the best. I mean, look at Nation 2 days ago, 8 pages given to corruption stories with the breakage, how many schools, how many hospitals that can be. Look at the standard, look at the people. I mean, look at Citizen on NTV. They are broken, and in fact, like a few minutes ago, NTV gave 15 minutes of their bulletin. Yes. I mean, to corruption stories, and they went to the library and got starting from Goldenberg and coming. I mean, there's nothing much can be done, yes. but this is one of the most comprehensive. Nation on Thursday, Friday, Saturday was giving up to editorials, yes, up to cartoons, up to illustrations on these stories. I mean, the goodwill from now the management and leadership of our media houses for the first time is showing that because one of the challenges journalists had was that thinking that editors will not give them the support to go and investigate. But looking at the stories, I was talking to one of the editorial directors of one of our media houses and even an editor in Nation. The goodwill is there. People are looking for documents. People are looking for stories on corruption. I mean, for the first time, I have seen one of the managing editors, of Nation sending out an appeal and saying anybody who has stories on corruption and can provide us with documents and whatever, we are willing to engage. I mean, at that level, media has given it the full throttle that it will need. You
said the full throttle, and on that point, this is something that actually, and that's one of the reasons I had invited Bwana Gadhara, and he posted this a few days ago and said, again, Kenyan media frames national issues as soap opera. Little effort to independently establish facts or to explain the systematic failures leading to the scam. Just breathless, he said, she said, renditions like the commentators at open-air movies.
Granted, Gadhara is entitled to his views.
And I agree.
But if looking at it, I've worked myself as an investigative journalist for 3 years for Nation Media Group, and some of the things, and like we said, we are doing a training. Yes. And if you listen to stories from Cameroon, for example, from Uganda, from Zambia, from the journalists we are doing the training with, it's not as easy as people think. And unless we start investing in getting a caliber of journalists that can then do what Gadhara and Wanjeri expects, it's not as easy as that. Mark, with your training in journalism, if somebody has not taken through all these levels of procurement act, illegal financial flows, what has happened, it's so complicated that it's not that easy. Immediately people start planning how to steal. They already look at how they will survive, how they will complicate the system. That is not easy. That's why even for the trained investigators from DCI and the rest and corruption, takes them 3 weeks. If I can tell you for free, this investigation around NYS started last year in July, not today. It has taken them almost a year to now start moving. Yes. So to expect a journalist in an hour's time to have gone into following the flow of the money, and it's of expectation. So, so to me, we need to give journalists support. Those who have the information, those who like Wanjeri and Gadara, who know how that money moves and maybe have been exposed to illegal financial flows, need to come out and assist. Because most of the media, nation might have a standard and stuff because they can contract external people to help them break those down.
Yes.
But for majority of our media houses, to get somebody to help them go through those processes, maybe at a fee, it's not easy.
Right. What exactly did you say you
Mark,
agree with in terms of the reportage?
Yes, I do agree that in this this time now, we are seeing a difference in how you're reporting.
Okay.
We're not saying that's not happening.
Compared to the previous NYS season 1, you'd say?
You know, yes. And my question would be, why now? You know, it's almost like the reporting that we are seeing is more like, you know, more of a political sort of game, you know, where you're being fed information that needs to go out. You know, like I was listening to David D the other day. Actually, I think it's yesterday.
Oh, yes, on KTN.
And he said that he thinks the information we are receiving right now is actually an attack, or rather targeted at DP Ruto. And I think it is true. Why are we having all this information bombarded at us suddenly? Why wasn't media able to do this before? Are we saying you never had this information before? I'm not saying you're not doing the right thing now, because honestly, to me as Wanjeri, I don't care where the information comes from as long as the public gets that information. But we need to be realistic. The media is failing Kenyans. We are reporting almost as if, you know, when it suits us, or when it suits a certain political agenda, or when it suits a certain, you know, clique of people. And right now we probably need to show, you know, the government is working.
If there is a question of misappropriation at NYS, doesn't it suit every Kenyan?
It does.
Whichever political divide you come from.
It does.
Yes.
It does.
And
so why would the media not report properly all the time?
I think we do media monitoring. And for all the years, for example, I've worked at the Media Council for now 5 years, and we have a full media monitoring department. And that no single week has ever passed without any media having a story on corruption. So it's just the way that people don't get satisfied. But true, and Wanjeri, you will see here, that at what level do Kenyans get agitated, so annoyed with our media reports, that then we give that support? Because we also need to look at the environment in which our media is operating. So that if one media house reported on a corruption story and they were fined 40 million Kenya shillings, and another one 28 million, the environment is also not conducive for such kind. And now with the push, obviously, there's now information, there's data now coming out. Media has given it all. And just telling you that it's just the environment.
But is there something to be skeptical about, especially some have asked, are you just being fed into a script? I mean, regardless of facts, there's a fact, and we'll follow through with the facts, and that's why we picked up on the story. It's everywhere now, and I believe it appeared with the Sunday Nation at first, and it was said that this information came from the DCI, it came from the ODPP. Is it something we should handle with some skepticism?
I mean, Mark, if, for example, I'm reporting to you today that we have converged 20 journalists from African continent to do a training on investigative, on corruption. And each of them, when they were breaking into their groups, even the assignment we have given tonight, is each of the people from Ghana, is coming up with a story and corruption in their own countries. It's not happening in Kenya alone. Corruption is now a global thing, and each of the countries, Uganda was talking about what Zambia was giving us another example, South Africa was giving us an example of the Guptas and everything. So why the skepticism? I mean, so to me, we need to trust and give media the support and more documentation and more stories to write about. Because what is happening largely, we see, and we belong to some WhatsApp group, we have seen journalists WhatsApp group specifically, you see a lot of joint effort into approaching these stories, that many of the journalists are now sharing documents and saying, maybe it might die in my place, but try it. And you have seen the effort, the involvement of journalists sharing documents, sharing story ideas. I mean, the level of collaboration among journalists themselves, even dealing with the corruption right now. The amount of time that is going on to check and cross-check. Because, I mean, while everybody are right to hold their own opinion, but sometimes to start, while the media does not report, we say they're sleeping. When they report, we are told they have been given information to fight the DP. You know, so where is the sincerity among the media critics?
Okay.
Actually, allow me, Mark, to respond to him. Some of the information that we are seeing from mainstream media right now had already been on social media, from bloggers, from people all over the place saying, you know what, amount ABCD is disappearing, it's going through bank ABCD. This information had been there, but the media was not reporting it. We were getting
but
some of
media
this.
is also media.
Yes. I'm talking mainstream media. All right, so social media had some of this information before, and you do not blame somebody for asking why now. Okay. Why now the sudden enthusiasm in trying to be all, you know what, we are reporting this thing and we need you people to have the facts. Where else, some of these facts we are getting now have been in the public domain, especially online, for a while. Okay. So we cannot blame the public for being skeptical. We can't blame people for asking, why suddenly are you so, you know, clearly trying, quote unquote, to do your job, because it is the media's job to give this information to the public. Yes, I do understand and I appreciate about the issues of being sued for saying things here and there. We've had precedents where people have been fined, you know, millions of shillings for defamation and such like things.
Yes.
That is appreciated. But right now, you've gone all out, okay? You could still have gone all out before, in my view, because this information didn't come to NTV or whoever else yesterday.
Okay.
It's been there.
I need to take a break on this point. Jacob Abere Matlala, you're following the conversation as well as others. I'll just read yours as we take a break. And you say, I salute Daily Nation taking its scandals, exposing high. Of course, citizens are happy about this. And we'll just continue pursuing that angle on why now, and with all this verve that we have and the push to put the details out here through the media. And you can put in your comments here and I'll read them out as soon as I get them and get to that point. We'll take a break, we'll be back shortly. Some responses here. Wanjeri, this is directed at you. Amos says, Wanjeri is a disgrace to the Kenyan people. We were there when the media tackled the Eurobond 1 and the NYS 1. Now, all of a sudden, she thinks Ruto is being targeted. Is it Ruto's happiness to see maize farmers crying? Flip-flop to say the least. You can respond to that as you jot it down. Paul Otieno Onyango, you say it is only defamation if one cannot prove the allegation. But if they say through our own investigation documents in our possession indicates that unless they want to say that it is simply a journalistic language to look serious when not. Kevin Mabonga, you say reporting corruption, so far the media has done a good job, but there's something else you had pointed out earlier, and you say that the narrative that media has failed Kenyans is from an ignorant point of view. People must understand the environment in which journalists operate. And just take another one here. Actually, Kimani echoes what you put out first in the first part. He says the rate at which the corruption scandals are breaking is suspicious. So much money being reported as lost that ordinary Kenyans can't fully comprehend the economic impact of such misuse and theft of public funds. And then Sheila Masinde, a colleague here once before, and she says media need to focus on corruption cases until they are resolved in the same way they dedicate so much space when they break, as we are seeing now. So you can first respond to what people
first things first, let me correct. He probably misunderstood what I was saying. When you bombard us with all this information, you know, you're hitting Kenyans with billions,
NCPB,
every single day. Yes. What happens with us is you hit us, we numb. We become numb as Kenyans. All these figures are flying right by our faces. And when that happens, we now decide, how do we cope? We start doing memes and jokes and, you know, to cope with this thing. The reason I am saying it is suspicious is the media needs to question itself. Are they suddenly being used in some form of power play that is political, okay? Or are they genuinely telling Kenyans, we are losing this amount of money, you know? Are you being used to settle political scores? That is a question that any other person could ask.
What if both is the case, both scenarios is a case, that you're being used, as you say, but in that same breath, as these political scores are being settled, there are actual cases that are coming to light and people being brought to book. What if that is the case?
Well, personally, I do not...
The end justifying the means.
Well, I do not care whether Ruto is exposed or not. It's
Okay.
none of my business,
Okay.
all right? I care that Kenyans are getting this information.
Okay.
But it is important also to interrogate why now. Is this genuine? Are we fighting corruption genuinely as the media? Are we saying that we are giving you this information about all these billions you're losing? Because you need to understand that Kenya is dying, and it's dying because of these thugs, and they're thugs, they're thieves. But we do not want a scenario where you're going to give us all this information and then it's going to die down. And I agree with Sheila, though there is the challenge, of course, of some of these cases take too long. So
Yes.
we're not going to expect the media to follow through one case for the next 9 years. And we also understand how it works in Kenya. If you have money, you're the one who's been taken to court, chances are the case is going to go whichever way. I'm not saying that the judiciary is not trying to do their job. I'm just saying from history and from what we have seen.
Yes.
I mean, you just steal $1 million, whatever billions you're going to steal and start a church and you're going to be fine. That is Kenya for you. But it is suspect how, it's almost like they want to numb us. They want to numb us into agreeing that this is our way of life. And Kenyans need to reject that because it is not the way it should be. We should reject it.
All right.
I think the assumption that the corruption stories currently are meant to fight any political cause is wrong on many assumptions. Because even the person we are mentioning, the DP works in the executive office of the president.
Yes.
And equally, if it were that these stories are meant to tarnish him, I am sure DP has fought many wars. He would have come out and fought for himself. I can tell you, if the DP were to find out that these stories or the corruption stories are being used to fight him, he would even put up a better fight than whoever is doing it now.
Okay.
So to me, that's not.
Would you say the media is being used?
It's not. The cases are not being, done through media. Media is just one of the players in the current. If somebody were to say that media is being played or used, then the courts are being used, the investigators are being used, all these companies, we are saying that these laws that we are saying that were broken, it's a lie, which is not the case. Okay. So media is not, it's it that stories come out. If we are doing stories on cancer today, for example, and we are running stories on cancer, people will come up. And we have so many cases people bringing to say nation is running a series on cancer, and people have had people who have suffered from this. If you are running a story of missing persons, for example, people will bring, because this is the current. Now, media is focusing on corruption, and people are bringing information on corruption. So it has happened with other stories. You have run stories on floods, and you get stories from floods from all over the country, and people will bring in. So for now, media has been focusing on corruption. By either commission or omission, more stories, more people are willing, because there's willingness. Remember, part of the discussion has also been, people claim that getting stories in the media is difficult. Now, already there's goodwill. Like I said, and I had discussion with a few colleagues, there is goodwill from the top and journalists to do this. There is focus for all the journalists now, to do these things. So the goodwill is there from the management, and people are exploring. And it's not easy, like Kevin Mabonga mentioned. It's not easy. The chairman of Nation Media Group also chairs a bank. One of the directors, Standard, also has a bank. The management of Media Max also has a bank. So once you see media bringing out against such, arrangement that even Nation can now mention a bank. It's not easy as people think. Nation does business with some of those companies.
Yes.
Some of those people are even advertisers. There are media also. So that it took restraint for Nation to reach a stage to decide now to name. It took a lot of thinking. You don't have a resolve and resolve focus. So to me, we should give media the support that is needed. Aware. I can tell you, I have 4 or 5 journalists who have already reported, who are moving, following this story, who have already reported cases of being followed.
Yes.
They have received threats. They have, I know 4 of them who have, confided to me, in fact. So you must also understand what pressure. So the environment is there. Let almost all the stories be exhausted.
Okay.
Sheila mentions following up of cases. Well, the determination for media houses to follow up some of these cases until prosecution. But you find that like the cemetery story, it took 9 years. So for media to follow a story for 9 years, Golden back to how many years? Sometimes the goodwill is there to follow the stories to put focus. Yeah. But sometimes the stories, the cases took too long that outside a mention or one or two, it also becomes so difficult because, and given the amount of scandals that are coming out every day and every if Nation can give 9 pages on a single story, out of the 32 or 46 pages, that's a huge investment in terms of, remember, some of these media houses have special pages. On Tuesday there's Smart Magazine, on Thursday there's, if they can sacrifice that to give us more story, then I think we see it's nothing. And we are aware. Media houses also have managers who have gone to school, and by the time they make that resort to invest, I am sure many of them, these media houses, their legal teams are all already alert. Yeah. They have been also helping in analyzing some of these documents, and just to be sure that these stories come out and the media houses are shielded against some. Yeah. So that investment cannot be that we have failed to detect that media is being misused. There's no misuse here.
Okay, and as you respond also, someone else says, Mullah says, Maura, you say, Wanjeri is speaking as a civil society player. They never see any good from anyone, as that's how they are wired. But she's beautiful and she has a great voice. Yeah. All right, okay, Maura, you're getting carried away there. But that's the aspect that's being put forward in terms of the response here of being questioning the source of this particular information that we are getting as media.
Okay, Mark, my question would be, so now you're giving us this information, then what? Is it something that we are going to see going forward, where the media will continue? As much as we understand what challenges you have, as much as we understand that the people who are receiving threats, I am sitting here, not because I'm a civil society player, but because I am a citizen of this country.
Yes.
And I am doing what I am doing as a citizen of this country, okay? And I know it is easier for us to dismiss a lot of people who say things we do not want to hear. As you know what, those are civil society people who are funded by donors, so they have to say this to justify their budgets. But at the end of the day, Mark, am I making sense when I say the media suddenly is, up with this? Are we going to see this continuing going forward? Are we going to see next week, next month, you continuing to give us stories about how this theft was carried out? Are we going to see you making the connections between the person who is stealing, the banks that are being used, how the money is ending up? And then somebody just wakes up one day and says, I found 60 million shillings in my account. And we are going to have, what was the headline? Kafura 2. And I'm going like, oh my God, no. That is not how we should be reporting this. As in, it is so serious. Somebody is admitting, I had 60 million shillings in my account.
But the seriousness of the matter, don't you think it still came out even if she was called Kafura 2? Because, the similarity of, that's why people are saying it's even NYS season 2. The similarities of how this has played out is almost ridiculous, and hence the headline. And it still had the effect.
Well, you can argue it like that, but for me, we cannot sensationalize some of these things. I look at how we are reporting, like this. Let's just take, for instance, the 5B that was stolen in 2016, health. We did, media did a blanket, 5 billion has been stolen. Suddenly, we are even seeing linkages to the first family and all the way trickling down. But the common Mwananchi down there just saw 5B going. They did not understand what that 5B means, disappearing. And when we are trying to report these things, we need to humanize this theft. We need to show people, you know what, when they talk about 1 billion, this is what 1 billion can do for you. This is what 1 billion is not doing for you when they pocket it. And also, when you're reporting theft, talk about some of these things, like the tenders that we have going, the projects that people are uploading and saying, agenda A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. All those projects are being done to, for some tenders to be given, as in we're thinking of supplying NTV with cups. Not because NTV needs cups, because how much will Wanjeri make when I supply NTV with cups? So we even, the public does not understand something like, take a good example about the coal issue in Lamu. if you dig deeper into that, you see it's all about tenderpreneurship. It's all about how much money people will make. It's not about the good of the country. It is not about how is it going to benefit us. It's not about whether we need it.
Right.
It's about how many billions are going to go through Barclays and wherever into offshore accounts.
Okay.
You know, so I think I'm not saying that media is not doing its best to report. I am just saying that it is important when you're reporting these things. You have to have that perspective of my audience. Fine, NTV's audience or Nation's audience may be ABCD, but you cannot assume that Mama Mboga is not going to get yesterday's newspaper and read it, or the day before's newspaper, or when they're wrapping meat or whatever it is that they do with the papers after they read it,
yes,
that they're not going to come through this article and they want to understand what you mean by 10 billion is missing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think at this stage, what I believe should be happening is to give media more support, to expose more, to help them. While there are deficiencies, and these are purely professional deficiencies in some of these things that people expect. And I was one of the people who raised issues on some of our WhatsApp groups that we have failed. I mean, in terms of helping people follow what law was broken, what is being done, how because I did manage. I mean, I have some of those NYS tender documents and some of those documents that were and at some stage we wouldn't be helped by reading media reports on exactly how this money was getting out. But and again, something that our media is yet to use a lot is the access to information law. Because I've checked, rarely do our media houses send under the access to information law to seek some of this information officially. Okay. That's something that we need to exploit. At what level? If media houses, and I have talked to some of the journalists who knew these investigations have been happening since then, I would have wished that they wrote to the Ombudsman to seek for some of this instead of waiting for the leak journalism that was happening, because largely what was happening was the investigating officers giving us a few statements from the witnesses, from the people that who are giving those figures. And some stage it was 21 billion, it was some 18 billion, up to today it was now 8 billion in the courts. So that already also tells you that there is a deficiency, that we relied so much on the leaks.
Yes, and something here Marvin Gakunyi says there is dire need for investigative journalists in Kenya who should go beyond investigating stories to analyzing news and how they are told. To the question of, should we be having some more independent reportage then, as you've said, you've pointed out the deficiency, some more independent work done by our newsrooms beyond what is fair.
Yes, that's an area that we need to invest in jointly, both civil society, media owners, media support groups, so that we continuously have independent analysis, independent search for this information. And like I'm saying, in one of the trainings we are doing, we want to customize. Actually, one of your colleagues asked me, why can't we down that training? And I'll be talking to your colleagues here, whoever is in charge of editorial, so that how do we help those skills that we are learning or sharing elsewhere to help journalists do independent investigative journalism with minimum for public interest. And part of the discussion here is how do we network media, civil society, and the rest of other players who might be helping in this process, so that we have independent professional analysis like it were. Because I mean, both as a journalist and both as somebody who has once a time chaired a tender committee, because I work in a public agency, I could see a lot of difficulties in journalists trying to explain. I mean, like, and now if you look at the charges today, it's purely now, and I'm seeing a very improved DPP office that has narrowed down and gotten to know, because previously, like NYS 1 or 2, you would see people being charged with theft of money or corruption. And Wanjeri will tell you, once you say a blanket corruption, what is the specific charge that this person did? And obviously there were people who are saying, like today's Nation headline, that when it says 2 billion went to the forest, that was not a sensitive. In fact, it was not a sensitive, because the money never went to a forest; it went to people's pockets.
In fact, I mean, it's even here.
But part of it is that even if you see at the charges, you would see the PS and the director of NYS were charged for misuse of office, not theft of fund. So to me, media also needed to start checking around the 40 people, around the whatever number, who did what specifically, so that it helps people to understand. So those are skills that we can invest in.
I am happy that he's talking about training journalists in reporting corruption
Okay.
or theft, as I like to say, cases. It should, extend to not just theft, to other areas of, how do we report human rights issues? How do we make that person who we are giving this information to understand that, when we talk about, somebody being paid, a company being paid, for instance, 1.3 billion shillings by NYS, as an example, you will probably find that there are stories of people who have genuinely supplied to NYS, who are dying in their homes, who are bankrupt right now,
Yes.
who've lost, everything because they're not being paid. And this is happening in all counties. It's not just in the big corruption cases that you're reporting. If you go down to the county, you will find, oh, you know what, I was told to supply, a tip of a biro pen. And somebody who supplied air will be paid. And this person who supplied genuinely will not be paid.
Yes.
So humanize some of these things.
You say this wasn't humanized, like this headline, if my director
Yes.
can capture this. It's Kafura Season 2, and this was actually posted by Mungai Waigoro. It's pointing out some of the headlines that he feels kind of watered down the seriousness. And this is a headline that we had on Thursday, May 24th. And yeah, she does not have an office. She did not tender for anything. She did not supply anything. She does not know what she is supposed to have supplied, but she was paid 60 million shillings. Don't you think that actually, you have a problem with this?
Yes,
I
I
don't
do.
have a problem
The first time I saw it, I was like, okay, wow, this is literally a soap opera. It looks like we are glorifying, or we are going like, wow.
But isn't it
this-
showing how ridiculous
this-
it is?
No, not really, not in the Kenyan context. And I'll tell you why I say that. We have a habit of making jokes, creating jokes out of serious issues. Okay, so I saw this same photo in a different forum where it moved from, oh, she has 60 million now, to her looks. To, oh, if I wish I was a woman and I will walk into, NYS and I'll just need to smile and I'll be given 60 million in my account. So that headline for me did not show how serious this issue was. Maybe I was looking at it from a feminist angle. It can be taken that way, but I think it watered down the whole thing. A lot of the conversations went to, I wish I was a woman, I would have done this. Or Kafura,
Yes.
Season 2, it now went to, salonists. And I've seen even in the current reporting, you can see they like salonists. I've seen that.
I think-
just
I think one of the things outside what we're saying is that Kenyans, we must also give journalists and the editors and whoever their right to their profession, to practice their profession. And I think a headline in a media house is not just picked by one person. Mark, you can't just wake up and say this is the headline for. I mean, there are editorial conferences. Editors fight over headlines. People fight. You have seen it in your editorial. So it's not something somebody just wakes up and says, I'll go. So it goes through a process where people discuss, where people say, and journalists in their own right have a professional obligation to either shock the nation, they can use a headline, or mock the nation, because where we are is purely mocking, and that's allowed in journalism. You can mock the nation, you can shock the nation.
So no problem with this one.
I mean, to me, that they were just mocking that we have reached a stage where somebody can walk anywhere and walk in 60 million. I mean, we have so cheapened the way we pick and plan the public resources to a level where, and that's purely what, because look at outside the headline, look at the editorial that was followed. Look at the stories. There was serious analysis on what has happened. So to me, to judge that's purely out of that headline had a specific purpose that it needed to do what? To mock the nation. And it's allowed in journalism.
Yes. And this other one, how 9 billion just walked out of NYS.
I mean, walked out, or the 2 billion that went to the forest.
Yes.
This one, because if you look at Mark,
this is much better than the forest.
And
the
Mark,
forest
the
one.
forest one is here.
I can tell you,
the first one is even
looking
worse.
at those documents, some of the documents that were involved in NYS, is purely the money walked away.
Yeah.
I mean, and you could see how the money, a document, an invoice that is just cancelled from 2 million to 5 million without a signature. I mean, you find a store manager signing to have received the uniforms or whatever supplies with nothing. It's just literally walking away.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I believe that editors and the journalists, having looked at the documents
There's
that
thought
they had,
that's put this in.
I mean, it was
She laughs at this thought.
That's the
It's
best they
actually
could
No,
do.
it's more about
because there was no energy
attention
involved.
and
Yes.
There was no
buying
energy involved.
newspapers.
And Kevin says you can use satire to convey a serious message. It's used.
Satire?
Yes.
That was satire?
Yes.
Okay, then maybe I
mean,
don't understand what satire.
I was
Gang
with a
says
colleague.
the headline was on point. The lady is too into her own perspective or opinion. The headline focuses on the repetition of the same scandal, which hits home in his perspective.
I was listening to a colleague from Rwanda today in the training, one of the editors from Rwanda, and what he was raising is that in Rwanda, much as the corruption index or perception has gone down and people perceive that there's no corruption in Rwanda, the challenge in Rwanda is that journalists in Rwanda, the corruption in Rwanda is so sophisticated that if journalists are not helped to understand those networks, they can never report. And Rwanda will continue to be reported as without, not because there's no corruption, but because the corruption is so complicated. And if journalists are not helped to understand some of those, the networks and crack into, they will continue reporting Rwanda as if there's no corruption happening in Rwanda. Right. So we need also to appreciate that and most of these journalists are traveled, looking at how corruption happens elsewhere, the illegal financial flows elsewhere, what you go through, and compare it with what's happening in our country, how people are plundering public resources, then is the mock. The best they can do is just to show that somebody can walk away with 9 billion. You know, and remember, in one of the stories, Standard said the buck stops with Uhuru Kenyatta. You know, and part of the message from the media houses and most of us is to the president that look, people are not even using any sophistication to get this money. People are just walking away. Can you do something, Mr. President?
Okay, and Mr. President, as in terms of what he has spoken to the scourge of corruption in this country, we'll be playing that, we'll be sampling that particular issue in a bit. I'm told that we could play it right now. I'm told we have some time. This was in October of 2016.
We want to deal with corruption because it hurts the Kenyan people, it hurts the Kenyan economy. And those charged with the responsibility, don't throw blame game. Do your job. Do your job. Let the judiciary prosecute the cases in front of it and bring them to conclusion to the satisfaction of Kenyans in the shortest possible time, because as they say, justice delayed is justice denied. What do you need? Tell us justice. What do you need? Tell us what you need and we'll give it to you. And then pronounce a man innocent, and if guilty, sentence. Commissioner of Prisons is, and by the way, today, Power of Mercy, when we're in Machakos, I'm going to release all the chicken thieves and all this, so there'll be room in jail for the ones you want to bring. Kesi ziko mbele yenu, shida iko wapi? Ni pesa mumekosa, semeni, and I'll be swearing in your new Chief Justice tomorrow. Ni nini ingine mnataka? Wewe ni nini unataka? Sema. Ni nini umekosa? Na kama umekosa, ambia Wakenya ile umekosa tukupatie. Alright? IG na DCI, semeni ni nini mmekosa? Ambaye imewazuia kuprosecute. DPP sijui kama yuko hapa. Ndio huyu. Basi sema na wewe ni nini imekosa? Tukupatie. Ndio Wakenya wasiseme mimi nalinda. Mimi silindi ufisadi. Ni nyinyi mmeshindwa kufanya kazi yenu. Wewe ulinisimamisha hapo mbele ya bunge, nikafuta mawaziri na nani ambao sasa wananilaumu, they hate me, wengine wana campaign against me, na wewe ndio uliniambia hii watu wako mpaka wa leo, this is 2 years, hujaniambia where their guilt is. Sasa jamani, makosa yangu ni nini? I really wanted to put this thing where it belongs.
Goodwill must be used. I mean, that goodwill. I mean, the environment.
Yes.
Remember, also, media was operating in a situation where we are not so sure. There was the feeling that government was harassing media, be it. And now, with that goodwill, And looking at it,
and he actually repeated the same kind of sentiment today.
Yes. So looking at that good, looking at the agenda 4, looking at, I mean, media probably, whether it was the handshake, media said Kenya needs peace. In 2008 and 9, at the post-election violence, media came out and said we need to support peace in the country. There were headlines and peace. When there was a handshake, there was tension in the country, and there was handshake. Media support. If there's goodwill, that using the goodwill, media can also highlight, because with this kind of corruption level and what the agenda 4 can never be achieved. And looking at agenda, and most of our media houses have looked and analyzed that if agenda 4 was to be realized, it will be good for Kenyans. Then why can't we do that? The only thing we need to notice, and I request media houses to operate, is when NTV, for example, is working, giving 15 minutes of their lead stories on corruption. Nation, Taifa, East African should be doing the same. A discussion around standards, so that is an approach, because it's also disheartening when NTV, for example, spares about 15 minutes, then one of your other publications is carrying a story that supports the same people we are saying are corrupt. So we need a joint, sustained effort around these issues. The goodwill is there, we must exploit it.
The goodwill is there?
I think we are blessed to have a president who has all the right words to say when he needs to say it, because his actions do not really reflect his words. I think that is the only thing we can say our president is gifted at. He is very good at speaking and say, munataka nifanye nini, nini mumekosa, you know, and he's going to put us in this moment of, oh wow, this guy actually wants to tackle this thing. And then he goes ahead and appoints people with questionable pasts all over his cabinet, all over his government, but he tells us, oh, you know what, forget this person is rumored or allegedly stole ABCD amount of money.
Yes.
I've now appointed him because, you know what, he's a worker, and whatever other excuse that is going to be there. I mean, for me, I think it's ridiculous, and I think it is important for those questions to be asked. You're saying...
So even when we air this, the president speaking tough against corruption, we should question it? We should be...
This is 2016. He spoke tough against corruption in 2016.
And spoken today as well.
And even today, yes, with this sudden outcry. Let's go back to the past a bit. 2016, 5 billion disappears from the health docket. Members of his family are mentioned. He goes, munataka nifanye nini, nini mumekosa. You know, I think it is important we stop pretending as Kenyans. And I think I'm beyond that part you know, of pretending. Okay. We cannot say there's goodwill because it has been voiced. We need to see action. And that is why the sudden action right now takes some of us by surprise.
Well, there you go. There's some action that's been taken, you know, from what we see and what we will show in this week going forward. And that's what I'd want us to come and finish with in terms of the leads that we should follow. What you're telling those journalists who you are going to actually be talking to this week about corruption, you'll use this as an example.
Yes.
What will you recommend that we follow through with this particular current state of corruption and the stories that we have? Actually, many stories that we're overwhelmed with in terms of corruption. We'll be back with the last part of Presspass. Welcome back to the last part of Presspass, and some comments as you're following this conversation on our coverage of the corruption stories, or theft as Wanjeri puts it, what we need to do. As you say, Simon Kimani, the number of scams now warrants a dedicated channel. Media, this is an opportunity. Where you fail also is follow-up on lifestyles of these culprits, and that's something else on the lifestyle audit. Or Pio, you say most of our dailies have made it an art to develop headlines which are catchphrases to get us to buy the papers, but this has sometimes led to the neglect of the primary functions of headlines. You can also address that. Marvin Gakunyi, sensationalism in news items is against the tenets of journalism in coming up with headlines or splashes. Matters such as corruption should be treated with the seriousness they deserve. POP Iam Pamba, you say framing of headlines is part of the art in journalism. Plain headlines will always attract low readership. satire, as you put it, attracts attention and lures persons to read stories, and that can be argued, as you said, this isn't a profession. Let us have the freedom to practice it. Planet Tunde Maikondetu, you say Wanjeri is right. It's all a chess game, and it's a matter of who's controlling the narrative. And probably because we are a forgetting nation, we lose sight of the bigger picture so easily. And yes, right now we have so many stories to work with. In fact, we're spoiled for choice sometimes. What do we start with? Which is story number 2, because we have NCPB, we have now the Kenya Power, but of course NYS is the biggest story right now. In terms of this week moving forward, what would you recommend? Tomorrow the big story will be them being lined up in court and the reactions that we will get. But from your perspectives, as we move into now the next phase of following up on this story, what should be the keen interest and follow-up from the media?
I think I would like to see consistency in reporting. I would hopefully wish to see that these headlines stop being sensationalized and take a more serious dimension. I would like to see you as media, bringing that story down to the point where that person feels the pain of losing that money and connecting it to their own personal lives. Why are we having people fundraising for Medicare? Why are we having Cuban doctors brought into the country when we have billions literally walking out, as you say, from places like NYS and wherever else? So I would like the media to simplify this theft for that person down there to understand. Okay, your target audience may be that person who can read, that person who will understand that, who will read that paper. But even when we go to vernacular stations, right, I have sat down and listened to some of this, and they still use those things. Bilioni, blah, 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 blah. Even that person in Mashinani is being hit with billion. Simplify this for the people. Let there be also...
Doesn't that even draw the picture of the magnitude, billion?
No. I mean, who understands that unless... We had to sit down. In fact, the math to come down with the 25,000 shillings per second was done between me and a friend of mine called Arti and Patrick Gadara. And we were going, how much is that? And we simplified it down to a second. And we decided we need to tell people 25,000 shillings per second is what is disappearing. And you're finding people going like, are you kidding me? Because it hits you now, we are talking 25,000 shillings per second, not a billion shillings. So we need to simplify this issue. And part of or another thing that I would like is Kenyans need to get angry. We're not angry enough, and we need to get angry. This is our money. If they're stealing this money, and they're stealing this money, they borrow from donors, and shame on those donors that keep giving us this money without asking for accountability. They're actually part of the problem. You come, you give people money who you know very well they will steal that money, then come back to you to borrow more, putting us in debt, and that money is not helping Kenyans. So this whole theft ring involves international players all the way down to that person who's sitting at home and finding 60 million shillings in their account. So for media, the consistency will help. You talking about it more often, following up, and also not being used to distract us.
Okay.
I am really hoping that will not happen. In fact, we are holding a protest on the 31st, organized purely by women countrywide. And we thought it would just be a Nairobi thing. And what happened is we went online and said, stop these thieves, and we are going on 31st to protest. And we had other people coming from different counties and saying, we also want to organize in Mombasa, in Nakuru, in Kisumu, in Eldoret, and everywhere. And surprisingly, most of these people, actually I think all of them leading the protests in their various areas, are women, and most of them are young women. And the same things you're talking about, journalists being threatened and all that, we are receiving those threats too. We are getting phone calls telling us we need to stop this. Some of the people who are planning this are complaining that they are being followed. So the threats are also there for people who are out there being quote unquote labeled as being sponsored and being civil society and being all that, because we are fighting as citizens and we refuse to sit back. And it is important that we stop not, we need to be angry. We need to continue being angry. Our anger is what is going to bring this country back on track.
Okay.
Yeah.
Victor, is it, first of all, as we pursue the different angles of this story, is the figure, the wholesome figure, 9 billion today, it's been said it's 8 billion shillings. Is it important to really get that figure right? Is it important as we continue with this story?
And one of my lessons in class, I always advise students to avoid figures in headlines because, like you said, they tend to either not communicate or over-communicate. And once, like during investigative session when we were not so sure,
yes,
like I said, you show the first amount was 21 billion. It has gone to 11, then now today it's 8. It also starts raising issues of credibility and trust in what information we are going. So
even if we tell it as a developing story.
I mean, if you mention that, then because whoever read the 21 billion, then read 11 billion, then read 8 billion, all obviously has some implication. And this is largely because we are depending on leaks from investigators who are giving us some of the witness statements, which sometimes continue differing. So that then calls for independent investigations as media itself, that the figures you have established by yourself are not figures that you have been fed by somebody. Because I know the figure thing was very, 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 very controversial. If you look at the PS's statement to Parliament, you saw him, apologizing to DCI many times of the figures, and you obviously saw the figures had a problem.
Yes.
So that we need to be keen that we are not being given figures to swear away, because at the end of the day, for example, how much are people being charged for? So that also helps. So like he's saying, breaking it down and telling people we missed 100 clinics, we missed 100 classes. The money that was stolen is enough to have given us 100 classes. It communicates to a bigger number of people than when we use billion, because a few people will understand a billion.
Someone mentioned that we forget easy. Sorry to cut you short on that point, but I want you to continue as you explain this other theme. My director says I should highlight it. It's quite many comments that came in, so I'm not able to get it, but if I do, I'll just put it up there. Oh yeah, here it is actually. Planet Michael Nderu, you say Wanjeri is right. It's all a chess game, and it's a matter of who's controlling the narrative, and probably because we're forgetting nation, we lose sight of the bigger picture so easily. So in terms of the bigger picture, NYS season 1, there were some loopholes, and it's almost like repeating itself so well in terms of how the systems were compromised, or the loopholes within the systems were compromised. So is it something else, another theme that we should be able to tell in following up this story? If missed, for instance.
And noted down that we need now to look at systematic failures. Where are these systems that people are exploiting? So that media now looks and says, NYS season 1, season 2, how was the scheme? How was the movement? What happened? So that we also highlight some of the challenges, the bigger number of people involved in some of these things. Because remember, when this thing came out, it was the PS, and people were saying the CS should step down. But as you notice, the number is now 40, and it's likely to go to 60 or 100.
Yes.
That just tells you how many people are involved in some of these schemes. So where are the system deficiencies that we need to deal with?
But something you also pointed out before, it's not even right now that we should be following these stories. You should actually track them and flag them from the budget process.
Yes.
And I mentioned that one, for example, the budget process is just being finalized.
Yes.
How much money has NYS been allocated this financial year? It will be important for media to just check how much money have the same NCPD, Kenya Power, KPA.
Like when it was given 25 billion, we should have started.
Why such a huge amount of money when other institutions are barely surviving? That tells you something. 2, what other agencies? Look at the ministries that are managing, for example, the Agenda 4 projects. How much money is being allocated there? And that tells you already possible areas that this same thing will repeat itself.
Yes.
So we need to look at the balance of budget, how much money, which institutions are being given huge amounts of money, because it starts there. What has Treasury said? Who is dealing, how much is Treasury saying about these amounts of money, either lost or unlost? What are the banks saying? The banks have an association. They have a responsibility in some of them. So to me, we start moving away and showing what is the Treasury saying, what are the banks saying, so that it gives us a bigger picture of what has happened. A story around how much has been allocated to the same agencies, and other agencies, especially those that will handle, the big four, would already start saying, and 6 months from today or a year from today, you will see huge scandals coming out of these agencies that have been allocated huge amounts of money.
Things should be following.
It's always repeating itself.
Wanjeri, Felix says something to an effect of what you mentioned earlier. David D said it correctly, that we must analyze a budget and see where we have been lied to, but the media is too dumb to see this and rushes for the narrative of the day. Victor says we're not dumb, and he's actually mentioned the budget process. But you agreed when I mentioned budget here, in terms of the bigger picture that we need to pursue.
The theft does not begin, or does not, by the time you're telling us 9 billion was stolen or 100 million is missing, that had already been planned out way before, during the time they're doing their budgeting. When they're allocating money to these sectors and these institutions, they know exactly what they're doing. The money we are seeing getting lost now was not stolen last month, or was not, planned for to be stolen 3 months ago. This, if you track it down properly, goes back to like 3-4 years ago. So you wonder, when the sudden, that's why this whole sudden, bombarding of Kenyans with this information can put people in a space where they're asking, why now? And Mark, let me just be very clear about the danger of failing to follow through on a story. He had mentioned earlier about the media supporting this peace thing and all that. Personally, what is peace without justice? And the danger of not following through with things is, the media focused on the handshake, and they tried, or rather they made it in a situation, brought about a situation where we kind of now erased the pain that was there, and that we have decided to forget that there are people who are still in pain, the people who lost their loved ones, the people who are asking, who is going to shake the hand of baby Pendo's
Can I hold you on that point? Because, and it might be diverting a bit from the focus of the day, but in the same breath that you said Kenyans need to get angry, I believe you also would wish that the media would play a role in setting the agenda to get people caring enough for the things that matter to them, hence the anger. To the extent of peace, and he mentioned it earlier, where we can actually also direct Kenyans to say that we need to work together. Isn't that the role of Kenyans as well in telling the story of the handshake?
How are you telling the story of the handshake? When you tell a story like that, in a view to erase everything, that's what I have a problem with. Okay, we say, okay, now we are all peaceful and life continues. That for me is a failure.
So people have continued dying because we didn't want
no.
to come at
Victor, there is no peace without justice. We cannot have peace if we do not have justice.
And
if you look at some of the comments we are getting online about this protest, for instance, on 31st, there are sections of this country that are saying, they're actually using Miguna's words, that we are not boarding. Why? The people who elected, the people who, and they're calling them the Rakus, and all these terms that were used. The people who elected the people who are stealing now should go and protest. Us guys are tired of dying. Us guys do not want to be killed anymore, because if we go to the streets, we are most likely going to be shot dead. That shows you that there are wounds that are still open. And when you have wounds that are not healing, Mark, and we have a media that is not following through, that is not saying, okay, fine, so we have this handshake, it happened, but where is justice? If we don't ask those questions, we are also failing Kenyans, Mark.
And on
following through is important.
On that breath of, same breath of following through, people have asked, is it important that we actually push for questions to be asked even from Raila Odinga?
Yes.
Is it questionable as to why he's been quiet? Is that an important aspect of this story?
I think people have asked, and Raila has spoken about it. And so, one of the things that we are saying, at what level did these people, for example, shake their hands?
Okay.
What was happening in the country? And would we have wished that what was happening in the country continues, simply because, I mean, how many stories did the media carry on Baby Pendo, for example? So that we are not saying that when media has covered the handshake, then it never carried the other stories. I mean, there are pages and pages of our media houses and screen where we are showing, I mean, the need for justice for these people. And what those Kenyans who are raising some of these things would be asking is, what role have they played in bringing the peace? Oh. How many of us have gone to court to seek for that judge instead of blaming Raila for all those things? Yes. So that we are not saying that it's only Raila's responsibility that justice must be in the country. Right. What have we done as individuals in our other private capacities to seek justice for those families? It can't be somebody else only alone. And if Raila has not done it, then Kenyans have forgotten about justice for this family. So we also need to contextualize some of these things. And yes, he has spoken about it. And Raila said it yesterday. I'm not his spokesperson or whatever, but he has said part of the handshake was on corruption. And let's see what we'll be doing. It's not even asking Raila and who will be pushing the 12-man committee. What have they done? How many of us are following up what this committee is doing? So that they were given some work. Are they working? So that we also look at who is responsible. Once you have been given this program to run, Mark, I can't be going to the producer or the MG all the time and saying Mark has failed. We also need to push the Mwangi and Ambassador team to see what have they done to achieve what they were given. Okay. So let's also diversify the pressure and ask relevant, because some of these things that are happening sometimes is that somebody is given an office, and this is what we are saying, put faces to the people who have done one or two things. Now that this has happened, I mean, I remember in one time in Uganda when the police officers who had been involved in beating Besigye and the rest, where people put pressure on those specific police officers, and media houses covered those individuals, exposed who they were, and to a level where they showed the churches they go to, the schools their children go to, and everybody was chasing them away. And that police officer actually went and asked for forgiveness from Besigye. That's the thing we are saying. I work in government, but there are some things that happen in government that I don't know. I work for government institutions. So let's also put individual responsibility, and that, I think, Wanjeri, you have repeated, individual responsibility. When we say government is stealing, government is stealing? We need to narrow it down and say it's Victor Bwire, who works at the Media Council, who has done this. Then that evidence-based reporting and evidence-based advocacy helps people in taking action against people. But once we remain broad and say government has stolen, it's impossible to know then in government who did what.
Is a scenario where a media house is able to name those people independently possible now in this phase of or stage of the story, because so far we have been fed all the information from
and that's why on Sunday,
so,
I don't
think you would
on Sunday we had that discussion and said you have if you had commissioned, and John Kamau does a lot of stories, or Kari does a lot of stories without government support, without agency support, and where you have evidence to the fact that it's Victor who did, you name me. Yes. But what was happening largely is that we are depending on leaks from investigators. That's why media houses were not so sure about some of the banks or names. That's why they never invite. But if, like we are saying, we are going to do independent investigative pieces where you are, as a media house, you are convinced that it's Victor who was involved, and we have gone through the due diligence, and you feel it's, in any case, media houses are insured. You can
even when they are sure of the people, they rarely name them. They call them a source in that government office. They
must protect their sources.
No. Not just protecting sources. We can say you find reporting things like we know it's Mark who stole a laptop. But we are going to say an NTV presenter is alleged.
Presumption of innocence.
Even when we have the information, And that is why this whole thing right now that everybody is being named gets some of us thinking, so what is different this time round?
Yes. But don't you think actually it would build my brand and credibility if I did have information on someone and I can back it with evidence, that I actually name them, whoever it is, and at the end of the day, people remember, we heard that story, it was broken by Nation or NTV, Daily Nation, KTN, Citizen, whichever the station is or journalist is. It actually will go to my credit if I name someone. So I don't think we would actually shy away from it in terms of hiding. Although there is the aspect of fearing a court action. Victor, you know about this because it comes back to bite us. But if indeed we have names and we can prove it, we've seen what work Dennis Okario, Onsarigo, John Alanamus have done, it builds their brand. So it actually would work to our advantage.
Yes, but does it always happen? It doesn't, and that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
That unless what we are seeing now is something we are going to see continuously moving forward, which is impressive,
okay,
good thing. Look at how South Africa did it. They never beat around the bush. It was Zuma, 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 till, you know, till the Guptas were out of the picture, right? But in Kenya, we need to borrow everything, not just one of everything. We need to go that direction where we are pointing fingers and saying Mark Masai stole a laptop. Not it is alleged, even when we have the information as media, we say it is alleged that a certain presenter, you know. So if as much as we are fearing you know,
court action against
court
us,
action and things like that, it is your responsibility to report these things. So right now, the information you're giving us, we really don't care whether it's going to affect the DP or not. Some of us are happy because it's out there and people are seeing this. But are we going to see it going forward?
Okay.
And if we don't see it going forward, it will come back down to it being a conspiracy that is political.
All right. Yeah. And that's something important to follow. But we have
I think the reason that is there, we are going to see a lot of investigative stories on corruption for the next 6 or 1 year or 2 years. It's not going to stop.
All right. And Patience Nyange, she's also in the profession. She says, today we've witnessed the arrest of over 50 NY suspects. Can we see media following up beyond the pomp of driving to and from DCI or ODPP, and follow up of these stories to the end will help Mwananchi understand what it means to them. Thank you for that comment.
We'll follow it up.
Yes, and this is the last comment in a few seconds. We only have 2 minutes, I'm told. Will the story for you have gotten to its conclusive end when you see names and people being taken to jail?
Yes.
That's where the story ends?
Yes. We not just them being taken to jail. After that, what next? First things first, I still go back to Kenyans. Get angry, get angry, get angry. They're going to, hopefully if they jail the 54, which is going to be good and historical, that is just the middle and the lower crop that has been, you know, pruned. Where are the top guys? Where are the people who they are working for? By the time a 30-year-old person is receiving 60 million, they were not receiving that 60 million out of the blue. They were receiving it most likely on behalf of somebody. Who is that somebody? Why is that somebody not among the 54? So it is not just about taking these people in posh cars. Please note, they were picked up in posh cars. If it was Wanjeri being arrested, I would be bundled in the, you know, in a boot somewhere or in one of those cop cars. These guys had convoys of really good-looking cars going for these people. So that tells you something about even how they're trying. For me, it almost looks like it's PR. Is it PR or are we going to see action? Are we really going to see some of these people going to jail? Hopefully, yes.
All right. And is that where it ends in terms of this story, where it should lead to?
To me, it has started.
Okay.
The story has just started. It must be retold. We must focus. We must follow it. We must show Kenyans. You know, like I was saying, how is the network? Who is who? I mean, like he's saying, outside the people who have been arrested, who else? Who else did what? So to me, the story has just started, and talking to colleagues in the industry, there's resolve, there's conviction that people will follow up. Media houses will follow up. I'm sure NTV, Nation are going to focus on these stories until some stage. As we focus on this, I'm sure more are coming up. I mean, from already the grapevine, there's too much happening around. And obviously also remember that given what the president said today again, there are a lot of, there's also a lot of resources from the investigating agencies, the multi-agency team that is working on to bring up. So more will be coming up. We don't know. I'm so sure I was talking to our colleagues from the Anti-Corruption Commission. They're also saying they're compiling their own lists and they will be releasing what they have been doing. Because remember also, we want to see comments from the Director of Budget, what has been happening. There are quite a number of reports from the Auditor General. So so we want journalists to dig these reports, cross-check, run around, and just help us understand what is happening with our public resources. But me, I believe it has started, and like we mentioned, we need to, like the training we are doing, we need to, move away and also come to nation media groups and whatever, help journalists who are working on these stories with the skills, strategies on how to cover some of these stories, so that is a continuous story.
Will you do it pro bono?
Yes, as the media council, I'm paid by government to do the same work, so it will be pro bono,
Yes,
no charges.
and also on what you'd hope for coverage in what you're planning.
I am hoping as many Kenyans as possible come out on 31st. This is about us. It is about our country. It is about them killing our kids' future. It is about people saying we have had enough. Fine, we saw arrests today, but is that enough? No. That doesn't mean that the theft is not going to stop. We need to stop these thieves. On 31st, we're going to meet at Freedom Corner. The OCS Central Police Station has refused to accept our notification for the protest. So we're going to try again tomorrow. Whether he accepts it or not, it is our constitutional duty to protest against some of these things. So the notification to him is just telling him, you know what, we are going to be on the street. We are not going to be asking him for permission. So him saying that he's not going to accept without permission from the OCPD or wherever or whoever, for us is a non-issue. So 31st, Freedom Corner, 8 a.m., wear red.
All right.
Wear red.
Wanjeri, thank you very much for that, and our cameras will be there to follow the story and definitely tell the story from all angles in terms of all the stakeholders who have a voice in this story as we keep telling it. And thank you so much for writing in. Thank you, Victor, for your time and your contribution over the years. Actually, it's not just been weeks, over the years. And Wanjeri, I think this is your second time on the panel. You were separately, or this is the first with me,
yeah,
and I appreciate your presence here. And it'll be a break for Presspass for a bit. Of course, we'll be catching the World Cup fever for the next few weeks, and right after, we promise that our team will be working on improving this product, Presspass. Hopefully, we won't have people who are cancelling on us in the last minute like this, and we'll have people lining up to be part of the show, to be part of this discussion. And it's not for me, it's not for the station, it's for you to tell us how to do our job better. So next week I won't be back with this program, I'll be back with something else, and hopefully in the next few weeks we will perfect this particular platform of Presspass for you. And even if it's not me, it will be someone else. It's definitely for a journalist to do a good job. This is a show for the journalists and for you, our viewer, our consumer, and we appreciate your support in this. The story continues tomorrow. Definitely our team at NTV is following this up, and even at Daily Nation and all the other media houses, my colleagues are doing a good job following it up. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much, you guys, for keeping me company this evening. I didn't know we'd be able to do an hour solid. We even over that. Thank you to my colleagues behind the scenes who you don't get to see, and as well, Mikey Mike, you can now go home and sleep. Good night.